That is part of the guidance that we're developing now, and the intent is to be as quantitative as we are able to be. Obviously, certain things like air quality are relatively easily measurable with monitoring tools, jobs created and so forth, although sometimes tying the jobs to the community in terms of the location of the job versus the person who's in the job can be challenging, and these are some of the things that we're hoping to get comment on from other agencies and from the public as we move forward with this program. But in the early stages, it's pretty easy to define some of the direct benefits that come from improved access to transit, for example, or the kinds of housing investments that we're just talking about now.
Can you give a little bit more detail on how the ARB intends to involve the public in the input with respect to the programs on disadvantaged communities? As you know, there's been a good deal of concern that's been expressed by many of those communities, and I want to make sure that the outreach is broad.
Yes, we reconstituted and refreshed the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee that was originally created along with AB 32 when it was first passed. We had a committee that helped us in the early stages of the scoping plan, and then once that was done, many of the members moved on to other jobs or other things, and the committee kind of went dormant. We last year brought in a new team of people from around the state who are active and current in that field, and I would say all of them, from having met with them, are people who bring a lot of expertise to this in terms of professional expertise, as well as a real commitment to reaching out more broadly within their own constituencies. But we're not only relying on them. We expect that these regional workshops that we're going to be conducting along with the other agencies that currently receive some of the cap and trade funding will also bring to the local communities. At least 7 of them, I believe, are on tap right now, and the hearings are planned to be held after normal working hours, so they'll be more accessible to people, and there's a lot of publicity because there's a great deal of interest, as Mr. McCoy indicated, with the regional level from the metropolitan planning organizations and the cities. Certainly in the early stages of this program, not every community was ready to put in an application for funding. It takes a while to get these kinds of programs up and running. Having had some experience myself once upon a time with creating park funding programs, especially when there's been a drought, so to speak, in funding, there's also oftentimes a startup period before people are able to apply. And one of the things that we're talking about internally, and I expect that at least some of the resources that Mr. McCoy is talking about are going to help with this, is how we do a better job of assisting in the most disadvantaged communities to help put viable applications together.
There have been some concerns expressed by members of the legislature with respect to the disadvantaged communities programs, and I want to make sure that there's ability for those who might be concerned and who represent disadvantaged communities to provide you with their insight as well.
I appreciate
that. We
can
work together on that. Are there any other questions? Mr. Williams.
So a little bit of a question for both of you is, what happens, how would you tell if some of the recipients were not achieving the kind of savings that we thought they would, and how do you course correct if that is the case?
Well, at the front end, of course, the projects are being reviewed based on the models, as Mr. McCoy indicated, that we have available to give us the best sense that we can get of whether they're likely to achieve those results. If the failure is due to some miscalculation on our part or on the community's part, I suppose we will attempt to correct as we move forward, but not punish either the applicant or the program for the fact that it didn't achieve every projected ton of greenhouse gas reductions. And that's one of the reasons why we've worked very hard to avoid, especially in the early stages of this program, having to do an exact ranking of all programs based on precise numbers of tons, because this is an evolving art form, despite the fact that we know a lot more than we did a few years ago. But I would say that the usual sanctions would apply if some organization took the funds and simply didn't do what they said they were going to do and directed the money somewhere else. The state has various methods that it can use to go after those funds. They're not always satisfactory, but then I think we have sufficient tools that we would be able to use.
Thank you. And of course, you would make recommendations for a change in allocation in the following fiscal year. Can you at some point give us some of those methods that the state uses to go after grant recipients that don't perform?
Be happy to put together something and send it to you. Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the update and getting this information. And I'm thinking ahead a little bit to the May revision, and looking forward to seeing what the allocation might be finally proposed from the governor's office, since it certainly appears as if revenue is going to be up dramatically from previous years, we'll have a modicum of experience to build on. We've also, the legislature, I think, will have to make some decision about whether the 40% that is discretionary and not a continuous appropriation, how we might apply that, and whether we continue to apply it in the way we've done it or do something different. I, for one, have some interest in thinking a little bit about how we maybe, begin to add into our mix here the issue of adaptation. I think that's something we have to start thinking about. And as I think about climate change and carbon-related issues and forest fires, trying to figure out whether we need a more robust approach to the timber issues in some way. And then finally, something that occurred to me as I, over the last several months, saw the increasing number of tragedies that seem to occur at railroad crossings in our state, and wondering whether there's some advantage to both for public safety but also for greenhouse gas reductions, to thinking about how do grade separations fit into the mix. Are those the kinds of things that if we don't have a bunch of cars waiting for a train to pass, idling somewhere, does that help reduce emissions and at the same time deal something with public safety? So a couple of things, just thoughts in my head as we look forward, and I do look forward to the May revision to have further discussion on all these items. So thank you very much for the presentation today, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to make that comment.
Thank you. We'll move on to public comment now. Are there any members of the public who would like to address this particular issue?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Chuck Mills. I'm with California Relief. And as has been discussed today already, we do anticipate there'll be additional revenue. One of the things that a couple dozen organizations throughout California have signed on to is a multi-coalition proposal that everyone's received that discusses some recommendations for additional investments. As several of my colleagues in the Natural Working Lands Conservation Coalition couldn't be here today, I just want to suggest opportunities to augment investments in the natural resources sector, as been suggested by the LAO. This is the uncapped sector, and so all investments here will result in a net GHG reduction. specifically in the multi-coalition proposal that's supported by groups such as Nature Conservancy, California Relief, American Lung Association. We're looking for additional investments in wetlands, the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program through the SGC, certainly forest conservation, and of course urban forestry, along with other investments in low carbon transportation, energy, and waste reduction. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Mark Fenstermaker on behalf of the California Habitat Conservation Planning Coalition. This coalition includes many county-scale habitat conservation plans as well as natural community conservation plans and NGOs and business entities involved in the formation of those plans. Like the speaker before us, we are anticipating some additional GHG revenue and would like to see more of that going into the natural resources sector. In particular, we would advocate for some new programs, new funding to the Wildlife Conservation Board going toward their Oak Woodlands program and to their Rangelands and Grazing Lands program. Both of these programs can facilitate better carbon sinks in oak woodlands and rangelands, as well as avoiding carbon emissions from the development of those lands. So we'd be advocating for those revenues, and thank you.
Good morning, Teresa Bui with Californians Against Waste. We're part of the multi-coalition ask, and we support the request. We're also asking to see CalRecycle funding to be doubled for the existing program, and we are supportive of expanding the funding to compost application research. The CalRecycle funding is the most oversubscribed, and their projects are the most cost-effective despite being very conservative in their greenhouse gas emissions calculation, and I believe that avoided landfill emissions were not included at all. And this is despite other agencies using longer project estimates. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Julie Malinowski-Ball here today on behalf of the California Electric Transportation Coalition. We join a large group of stakeholders supporting low-carbon transportation funding. We would strongly encourage this committee and the administration to take a second look at the funding based on the direction given by this legislature last year in SB 1275 and SB 1204 and look at a larger amount to accommodate the direction given in those bills. We see it more around the lines of $350 million as opposed to the $200 million that's currently being proposed. And then on behalf of the California Biomass Energy Alliance, I strongly encourage you also to look at AB 590 and the direction given in that bill to use GGRF funds to divert wood waste and materials out of the landfills, out of the forest, and out of the fields to biomass facilities to reduce those impacts and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Will Barrett with the American Lung Association in California. As noted earlier, we are part of the multi-coalition effort to support all the investments in cleaner transportation, smart growth, and other programs that improve health and fight our climate challenges. So we wanted to just say that, again, we're part of these coalitions. We support the maximization of health and air quality benefits through these investments, which are especially important to our disadvantaged communities. So thank you for your time this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Pablo Garza with Nature Conservancy. We are also part of the multi-coalition that requests that others have already referenced, and so we support that. And I just want to point out and reiterate what my colleague Michelle Pastro discussed last week when she presented before this committee, but the natural and working lands can reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well as provide other benefits such as water quality, water supply reliability, and wildlife habitat. But they're also unique in that they pull carbon out of the atmosphere through biological sequestration. And for that reason, we ask that 10% of whatever the expenditure plan ultimately is be dedicated to the programs in that sector. Whether we're talking $1 billion as the governor proposed in January or some larger number, as much as $2 billion. I also would like to see across the board, we've said this before, but across the board, consistent accounting mechanism for measuring and quantifying GHG benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have one BCP to vote on this issue. We'll need a motion. It's issue 1.
Yep, move the BCP.
Second.
Thank you. We'll vote.
Bloom,
Aye.
Gordon. Aye. Obernolte. Patterson. No. Williams.
Aye.
Item is out.
Issue one under the ARB. Okay. Ms. Nichols, you have two BCPs now under ARB.
Yes, we do. The first relates to the consolidation of our laboratories in Southern California. I guess we have a change of teams here. The Air Resources Board's proposed new motor vehicle and engine testing facility in Southern California is a cornerstone of our efforts to meet both our air quality and our climate change challenges. The proposed new facility will replace and consolidate our existing facilities in Southern California. This project is a major investment in our future. The proposed fiscal year 15-16 budget request of $5.9 million allows us to initiate the process and develop the necessary detailed design guidelines and performance criteria for the new facility. Our existing Southern California facilities are now stretched beyond their capacity and cannot support ARB's current, much less future testing needs. They don't provide adequate infrastructure for expansion or upgrading of equipment, and they're not energy efficient. In fact, we consistently rank in the laboratory as one of the least efficient state buildings, which is an embarrassment as well as really an unfortunate situation. The existing state-owned laboratory also is too small to modify and consolidate our operations. The agenda refers to the Legislative Analyst's Office's assessment of the budget change proposal and provides our response. As you heard from the LAO, or have seen, I guess, already, we're continuing to address the questions that they've raised, particularly about the size, scope, and potential alternatives to the project. Our analysis to date indicates that the ARB's preferred approach strikes the right balance between size and scope of both light and heavy-duty vehicle and engine testing and consolidation of the facility, as well as the cost, size, staffing, and equipment availability. We're happy to continue to work with the LAO to provide responses to any additional questions that they have. But I would note that one alternative that has been suggested, which was to, in effect, build one new facility while maintaining the existing antiquated and inefficient building, while continuing to pay the escalating lease costs for the other support facilities, would really create an unworkable operating, management, and financial situation for the state. With respect to location, the administration has proposed to transfer a large plot of existing state land near Cal State Polytechnic University, Pomona, to the CSU. This proposed land transfer is included in the governor's proposed 15-16 budget. One contingent component of the land transfer is for CSU to accommodate the land needs of this project within the Pomona area. But discussions are still ongoing with CSU as far as a specific location for the site, and this transfer has not been consummated. We also recognize the need to provide an opportunity for other interested stakeholders to submit information about potential sites that the state might want to consider prior to completing the land transfer. Therefore, on April 2nd, the Department of General Services issued a request for information. This request will help the state determine if there are competitive alternatives to the land transfer. These submittals are due on April 23rd. Therefore, the process can be completed in time to inform the FY 15-16 budget process. I just, again, want to stress my personal belief that California's reputation in the world and our effectiveness in reducing vehicle and engine emissions, improving air quality and addressing climate change rests solidly on our focus on data and science as the foundation for all of our regulations. The Southern California facilities have played a central role in this success for many decades, and the need to create a new facility will ensure the success that will continue into the future. So I want to thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Does LAO have comments?
Yes, thank you. Again, Brian Brown with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We did look at this issue, and we have been, as Ms. Nichols has stated, been working closely with her staff to continue to review the proposal. They've even taken us down to the facility, and we've been able to walk the facility and see it in person. We do have some concerns with the specific proposal, but I probably even want to preface those comments with noting that the current facility clearly faces a number of challenges. It is maxed out. It is older. They are crammed into the space that they have, and they are operating in multiple facilities, which have some inefficiencies. So all that's to say that the comments I'm about to provide is not meant to suggest that it's an unworthy consideration to find some way to improve their ability to conduct their testing program. Really, the concerns that we have are really about how the department landed on this particular proposal. There are 4 distinct issues. The first 2 are really the important ones, and the most important ones, and are interrelated. The first is how they landed on this size and scope of a project. Under this proposal, the amount of testing, lab, and office space would more than double. We've worked with the department trying to understand, well, how did they land at that size of an expanded capacity or expanded facility? And they've been able to explain to us, well, that would allow us to conduct this many more tests and do this much more of the type of work we do. And that makes sense. What's challenging, though, is we haven't been able to get from them a clear understanding, well, how did they decide that that was the amount of testing they need to do, that's the optimal level of testing and work, versus maybe a 50% expansion or a 3 times expansion. And I think, in fairness to the department, that's sort of a difficult question to answer, because what is the optimal amount of testing? There's always probably some benefit to every additional amount of testing you can do, but there are also additional costs, and so trying to figure out what that trade-off is in fairness, a challenge. But what that does, though, is it also makes it difficult for us to evaluate and for you to decide in approving a new facility whether this particular facility and its associated costs and benefits of expanded testing capacity, how that compares to other alternatives that might be available, whether that's to renovate the existing facility and add some new additional expanded capacity, for example, for heavy-duty testing, just as one hypothetical example. Because what we don't have is a good evaluation either of those alternatives, both the potential cost and the potential additional testing capability that would be available from those alternatives, and then for you to be able to compare that to this particular proposal. So you could weigh, well, here's how much additional capacity we get, but at what cost, and where do you want to draw those trade-offs. The third issue that we raised, again, a little bit more of a minor concern, but still significant, which is the administration hasn't identified how this project will be financed in the long term. They've identified the specific funding sources, but have not made clear that those funding sources can sustain the cost of this project. Just as one example, the annual cost that would be borne by the MVA would be roughly $17 million. There are a lot of other pressures on the MVA right now, and as we've written up in other reports, and so it's just not clear how the administration or the legislature should decide. Ultimately, is going to have to prioritize among these different projects. You want to make sure that the funding sources can support the project if you're going to make this long-term investment. And then the fourth issue we raised is actually no longer an issue. It was initially we had some questions about how they arrived at the budget year amount of $5.9 million, their request amount. Subsequently, they provided some additional information, and we've been able to compare their cost estimate to other design build packages, and we're comfortable that the amount they're requesting, if you decide to move forward with this project, is reasonable.
Thank you. I know Mr. Obernolte has a question, and I'd like also to give Ms. Nichols an opportunity to respond. I don't know whether you want to go. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I also share your concern about the use of MVA funds and the stresses that are on that particular funding source, but it didn't seem to me like there was a conclusion there at the end of your recommendation. Are you satisfied that the use of MVA funds is appropriate, and do you support it?
I don't think we raised the question about whether it's appropriate. I think it's just a question of ultimately the legislature will need to make sure that the MVA is only committed to the number of projects that it can actually support. And so this is really a prioritization question, I think, for the administration and the legislature. You may not be able to, the fund may not be able to support all of the projects that have been proposed. If that's the case, how would you prioritize among them?
Okay. And my second question is for Ms. Nichols. So your request today includes a $200,000 appropriation for site selection, which I found a little confusing just because it seemed to me like the site had already been selected. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I would ask Finance to answer both of the questions, if I may.
Hi, Jason Haas, Finance. The $200,000 not for site selection. It's to verify the land transfer that's under contention right now is roughly 270 acres. ARB needs roughly 14 of those acres, but the exact carve out of those 14 hasn't been determined yet. And once it is, the 200,000 is just to verify that the land that they've been given is adequate. So this wouldn't be a site selection process.
I see.
It'd be a land transfer, and the 200,000 would just be to assess the land. And that 200,000 would be first. The 5.7 for the performance criteria couldn't be spent until the 200,000 was spent and verified that the land was adequate.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So that's more along the lines of evaluating the site.
Exactly. Site assessment is how we build it, not acquisition.
Okay.
I was just going to say, as far as the motor vehicle account was concerned, I believe it's only one of several potential sources. And
Susan Montoya, Department of Finance. The funding sources and the funding split proposed in the governor's budget for the initial proposal, the $5.9 million, are based on funding used to support the operations currently conducted at the El Monte site, which are the motor vehicle account, the vehicle inspection and repair fund, and the air pollution control fund. We do understand there are competing needs on all these funds. We believe that all of the funds have adequate nexus to be used for these costs. The initial cost proposed in the 15-16 governor's budget would be cash funded, and we would come forward with a comprehensive long-term financing proposal when the construction proposal, after these initial steps, consistent with the normal capital outlay proposal process.
Thank you very much. My chief concern with the stress on the MVA fund is that when you have these competing priorities and we approve multiple appropriations at the same time, it can be very hard to prioritize after the fact when the projects are already underway, and often that is used as a rationale for raising fees. And I want to make sure that we're being fiscally prudent going in and not oversubscribing the fund, and it sounds like that we are not. Would you agree with that?
That's correct. This proposal is necessary to move forward. We've identified the need. I believe the LAO, while not concurring necessarily with the identified size and scope, does concur with the need for the initial outlay that's proposed in the governor's budget. So I believe that we are good moving forward, at least from our perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Mr. Williams? And then we'll have public comment if you'd like to step forward.
Wanted to appreciate the detailed information that I was provided in advance of the meeting, that it helped to get to know this item and the need for it. And obviously, we want to make determinations that are the best possible available science. That is not always easy, and to have a facility to do that. And so I will be supporting the item.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
Good morning. Will Barrett with the American Lung Association in California. We support the budget and staff proposal to move the new lab facilities forward in order to continue to carry out the life-saving mission of the ARB. We feel that the more efficient facilities and updated equipment will be critical going forward. As Chairman Nichols noted, California has made significant progress in the fight for clean air, and this will ultimately refresh the toolbox we have going forward to continue that fight. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's have a vote on this item. Is there a motion? Yes. Oh, my apologies.
My apologies.
David Jones on behalf of the City of Riverside. We don't have an official position. We do note that there is concern with, I think the LAO talked about the process, about the site selection, and I know that there is some ongoing discussions with the University of Riverside as far as a possible potential site that they may have interest in. I know Senator Roth is interested in pursuing that. So we applaud the direction that they're moving and that they're at least looking at other sites. The taxpayers' interest, I think, is at stake here, and we'd ask at this point for you to consider possibility of re-evaluating site evaluation, because there might be a potential for a second site. So I know that that's of concern, and the city has not taken an official position, but I wanted to note it for the record.